2022 has been my most productive year as a roller coaster enthusiast so far. After ending last year with 54 coaster credits, I gained 52 new ones this year, which leaves me with a grand total of 106 ridden roller coasters under my belt. Nearly all of these came from parks I visited for the first time in 2022 in states ranging from New York to Ohio to Virginia. In keeping with my annual tradition, I'm here today to share the top tier of my current coaster rankings, and the coasters will only get better as we go. Welcome to CLT Coasters. My name is Josh, and these are my top 20 roller coasters as of 2022. Starting things off at number 20 is Afterburn at Carowinds. I had this as high as number 6 last winter, and even though it's dropped quite a bit since then, I still get a kick out of this one after nearly 70 lifetime rides. It's my second favorite inverted coaster from B&M, with standout elements including a fast-paced zero-G roll, a powerful batwing, and an insanely whippy corkscrew. The ride's pacing is excellent, with the train ripping through the layout at speeds of up to 62 miles per hour, and the fighter jet theming captures the intensity and overall feel of this ride perfectly. And even though it's one of the oldest coasters on this list, dating back to 1999, it's still running as smooth as it ever has today. I love that Afterburn rarely has a line because parking myself in the back row right seat has become one of my favorite pastimes at Carowinds, and it'll continue to be for years to come. Our next coaster barely missed the cut for last year's list, but the same won't be happening this year. Number 19 is Hollywood Rip Ride Rocket, one of the most underrated coasters out there. I would equate this to Maurer's take on a hypercoaster. The first drop can compete with some drops of over 200 feet. The layout is sprinkled with some intense helixes and strong moments of airtime, and unique elements like the vertical lift hill and non-inverting loop give Rocket a lot of character. I know it's not the smoothest, but I find that the roughness doesn't really bother me considering the only form of restraint on the ride is a lap bar. The music feature, while gimmicky, is honestly a really fun touch that gives the ride a new level of re-rideability. And if you're in need of a music suggestion, Busy Child by the Crystal Method is a certified banger. This is my favorite ride at Universal Studios Florida, and it's one I'm really excited to re-ride in 2023. At number 18 we have Intimidator at Carowinds, and this one has really grown on me over the course of the year. I've been able to get dozens of rides with a lot of space, and it's kind of become my Carowinds go-to. It may be my least favorite B&M hypercoaster of the three that I've ridden, but it still has the best first drop of them all, specifically in the back of the train. And as with every B&M hyper, there's absolutely no shortage of airtime. The trio of camelbacks all gives some super sustained floater airtime despite the trim brakes, and even if it isn't the strongest, the finale still manages to lift riders out of their seats a few times. The layout may be basic, but the ride still accomplishes its goal of giving a smooth, floaty, and graceful ride very well. This is another coaster that deserves more love, and with its very long ride duration, I always feel satisfied whenever I hit the brake on an Intimidator, definitely a personal favorite of mine. Just ahead at number 17 is another Cedar Fair B&M hyper, Diamondback at Kings Island. This is the first new for 2022 credit on the list, and to be honest, I thought it was overhyped. Don't get me wrong, the first half is fantastic. The drop is really good, and the floater airtime on the camelbacks is the most sustained airtime I've ever felt on a roller coaster. But then you hit your first set of trims, and by the mid-course breaks, Diamondback kinda dies. The splashdown still makes for a really picturesque finale, but those last few hills don't really do anything. Not even the drop off the mid-course. I still really enjoyed it though, it's solidly in my top 20. And I could lap it all day because the first half is just that good. To me, this feels like a slightly better version of Intimidator, which is not a knock on this ride by any means. After all, you can never go wrong with a B&M Hyper. But not all B&M Hypers are created equal, and hanging on as my favorite of the bunch at number 16 is Candymonium at Hershey Park. Now I've only ridden Candy once, but boy was that ride phenomenal. This ride is the most variety of any B&M Hyper I've ridden, throwing in elements like a speed hill and a helix into an outer bank to complement the usual first drop and floater-filled camelbacks. On top of a good layout, the whole ride is just so graceful and beautiful, and the helix around the Hershey Kiss fountain is a huge testament to that. I know it's one of the shortest of its kind, but I really feel like B&M is perfecting their craft with their newer hypercoasters. I'll get an updated opinion on Candymonium in 2023, and time will tell if it still holds up, but for now it remains my favorite coaster of its kind. Kicking off the top 15, we have Millennium Force at Cedar Point. This is the first of multiple Giga coasters you'll see on the list. It was actually the original Giga dating back to the year 2000, and it still holds up after 22 operating seasons. This Intamin creation has a lot to love. It's got the best first drop at Cedar Point, a 300-foot plummet at an 80-degree angle. Each of the overbank turns pile on the positive G's. Hear that, guys? This is Millennium Force, not Millennium Forceless. and the 2 camelbacks as well as the speed hill give some solid floater airtime. Do yourself a favor and wait a few extra trains for the front row because the sense of speed combined with a stronger and more sustained airtime are well worth it. Finish it off with an absolute bop of a station soundtrack and you've got yourself a sensational ride experience from start to finish. Just edging it out at number 14 is the other Blue Giga coaster in Ohio, Orion. This is my favorite B&M at Kings Island, and it's not hard to see why. The first drop is breathtaking, and I even prefer it to the first drop on Millennium Force. There's some great floater airtime to be found on the speed hill, some weaker airtime on the giant camelback, and even a touch of sideways airtime on the wave turn if you're on the right side of the train. But Orion saves its best element for last. After a pretty mild helix, the train powers over a banked airtime hill that'll send everyone flying with a strong pop of flowjector airtime. It's my single favorite moment on any Giga coaster, and it's an excellent closing statement for this stellar B&M. And just like Millennium Force, Orion has its own soundtrack, and it's even better than the one belonging to its neighbor in Sandusky. Really great ride experience all around. One of my old favorites finds itself at number 13, Copperhead Strike at Carowinds. This mock double launch coaster tends to fly under a lot of people's radar, but it honestly shouldn't because this one is well worth talking about. With one of the most varied layouts I've ever seen, Copperhead is a wonderful combination of 5 hang-time-filled inversions, powerful airtime moments, snappy transitions, and some of the best theming on a coaster in the Cedar Fair chain. I know the restraints can be a little polarizing, but I think they're super comfortable, and they leave you with a lot of freedom to really feel those forces. Every year, more people hop onto the Copperhead Strike hype train, and I encourage you to do the same. Because whatever you're into when it comes to roller coasters, I guarantee you Copperhead has it. I'll always have a soft spot for this ride, even if it falls out of this list. But for now that won't be an issue, because it's more than good enough to make anyone's top 20. Now here's one I never imagined I'd put so high, but here we are. Number 12 is Raptor at Cedar Point. Yes, I like this more than Millennium Force, fight me. My expectations honestly weren't too high for this one, but Raptor made sure to ball up my expectations and hurl them straight into Lake Erie. The layout is simply phenomenal, with 6 super snappy inversions including the world's very first Cobra Roll, which is my favorite element on the ride. In contrast to those inversions, you'll find a shockingly good first drop and that famous double helix, which feels like it wants to rip your legs off. I'll admit it's got some jank to it, mainly on that last turn into the final brakes, but do I really mind? No, I don't. I rode this 7 times in one day at Cedar Point, and even that wasn't enough for me. It's my favorite inverted coaster from B&M, and it's not exactly close. The day I make it back to Cedar Point for some more Raptor rides, it's gonna be a beautiful one, and with luck, it'll be sooner rather than later. So how do you beat a really good B&M inversion machine? If you're Universal, you put a launch on it. Number 11 is the incredible Hulk coaster, and from my very first ride on this beast, I have been absolutely hooked. Hulk brings the intensity with 7 dynamic inversions, including my second favorite inversion of all time with that unbelievable 0G roll out of the launch tunnel. Speaking of which, that launch tunnel is just so sick. The effects combined with a fantastic onboard soundtrack make it a real treat for the eyes and ears, and the launch itself packs a serious punch. The first half, which includes most of the ride's inversions, is wildly forceful and is equally as picturesque over the water. And even though the second half dials things back, I still find myself enjoying it quite a bit. It may trace its roots all the way back to 1999, but Hulk is proof that sometimes older can be better, and it still holds up as my second favorite B&M to this day. At number 10 we have my 100th roller coaster, and one that you may be surprised to see this low. This is Intimidator 305 at Kings Dominion. Now I do think this coaster is a little overrated, mainly because a lot of people would put this at their number 1 spot, but I still enjoy it very much. The first drop is amazing and yanks you over the top, and it'd be even better if the trains had lap bars instead of those Intamin soft straps. But even with the soft straps, you'll still get quite a bit of sustained airtime on the way down. The bank turn that follows is just messed up, and you're sure to gray out at the very least from the positive G's. And while the rest of the ride lacks in the airtime department, I-305 doesn't let up its pace until the very end, and it piles on the intensity with some fast-paced turns and ultra-snappy transitions. The whole experience is honestly really draining, and I can barely handle 2 rides in a row, but the sheer intensity on top of the fact that it's a literal giga coaster earns I-305 as top 10 spot on this list. I'll admit that I wasn't feeling my best on my visit to Kings Dominion though, so it's possible that it could climb up even higher in my rankings in the future. Next up are my 2 favorite wooden coasters, both from GCI, which fall back to back in my rankings. And honestly, it was a really tough call deciding which one I liked more, but ultimately, forgive me Jacob, I ended up placing Mystic Timbers at my number 9 spot. This is by far my favorite coaster at Kings Island, and with every lap I got on Mystic, the more I loved it. The floater airtime hits hard and often, with 16 quality pops found from the moment you twist down the ride's 98-foot first drop. Many of these airtime moments are combined with directional changes, which throw in some laterals as you continuously fly out of your seat. The ride experience is fan-freaking-tastic, but things don't end once you hit the final brakes. Instead, the truck-themed trains roll into the ride's infamous shed, where you'll encounter some really solid theming with a 1980s horror movie vibe. I know a lot of people kinda crapped on the shed at first, but I personally love it. Anything beats sitting on a regular old brake run, and the theming inside the shed might be the best in the Cedar Fair chain. Overall, Mystic Timbers is a masterpiece in just about every way, and I'm really looking forward to the day where I can marathon it once again. But as I said, Mystic Timbers is not my favorite wooden coaster, or even my favorite GCI. Those awards go to Thunderhead at Dollywood, which takes the number 8 spot. I used to have Mystic over this, but after I got to re-ride Thunderhead last month, I boosted it over the top dog at Kings Island. The reason being, Thunderhead is the more intense ride. I thought the airtime was a bit stronger throughout on Thunderhead, and a lot of the turns on the ride actually pull some pretty good positive G-forces. It is a little rougher than Mystic, but I kinda like my wooden coasters with some edge to them, and on coasters like Thunderhead it honestly adds to the experience. Not to mention, I tend to prefer twister layouts on GCIs over out and back ones, since twisters are right in their wheelhouse. And Thunderhead boasts one of GCI's finest layouts even after 18 years. But yeah, all this to say, I love me a good GCI, and I'm super excited to get on more of their rides in the future. Looking at you, Gold Striker. So now we're getting to the point on the list where only elite rides are left standing. Each of these next 7 coasters would get a 10 out of 10 from me, and I love them all for their own reasons. With that being said, let's keep it moving with number 7, and that's going to be Maverick at Cedar Point. I had dreamed of riding this intimate launch coaster for so long, and I finally got my chance to ride in June of 2022. And let me tell you, Maverick did not disappoint. The whole ride is still butter smooth 15 years later, and that layout is just loaded with variety. You've got a launch lift hill, a crap your pants first drop, snappy transitions not unlike the ones on Intimidator 305, powerful ejector airtime hills, a twisted horseshoe roll, some wild stangle dives, that second launch through a tunnel. Sorry, got a little carried away there. But yeah, if all that sounds amazing to you, that's because it is. And Maverick does it all while staying under the 105-foot mark. It's a shame they had to remove the old Heartline roll, but even without it, Maverick is still an absolute powerhouse, and it should be on every enthusiast bucket list. Number 6 is the first of 3 RMCs I've ridden so far, Twisted Timbers at King's Dominion. And if you're into airtime, then boy do I have some good news for you. As far as raw power goes, Twisted Timbers might have the strongest airtime I've ever felt on a roller coaster, and you'd be hard-pressed to find a ride with as many airtime moments as this one. Standouts include those 3 back-to-back camelbacks toward the beginning, a stupidly powerful trick-track double-up, and a whippy banked airtime hill underneath the lift structure. The ejector buffet is broken up by 3 perfectly placed inversions, including an amazing barrel roll drop to kick off the ride experience. The layout is simply masterful, and I really like how it stays true to the layout of the coaster it replaced, the much maligned wooden coaster Hurler. The park also did a pretty good job with the theming of this ride, even if it's admittedly kinda weird, but it is a Cedar Fair theme after all, and I'll take any theming over no theming any day of the week. Overall, Twisted Timbers really took King's Dominion to the next level when it opened, and I think it's the undisputed best ride in the park. Coming in at number 5, we have Skyrush at Hershey Park. It's been a hot minute since I got to ride this Intamin Wing hypercoaster, but even after more than 50 new credits, it's still hanging on to a top 5 spot. Going ahead and addressing the elephant in the room, the restraints, they don't bother me one bit. My thighs handle them just fine, not to mention your upper body is extremely free to feel the forces of the ride due to their setup, and that's something that I find really important when it comes to restraints. Speaking of forces, Skyrush just might have the best forces on any coaster anywhere. The positives can only be beaten by something like Intimidator 305, the laterals and the Stangle Dive are just lethal, and the airtime is not only some of the strongest in the game, but it's the most quality airtime I've ever felt. Every single hill sends you flying, especially those first 2 camelbacks that are still my favorite airtime moments to this day. And who can bring up Skyrush without bringing up that illegal first drop? Seriously, whoever designed this drop with a kink halfway down has got some issues, and I absolutely love them for it. I explain everything better in a separate review, but the bottom line is that I adore Skyrush. I get that it's not for everyone, but it's certainly for me, and I'm so thrilled to be getting back on it in 2023. Our second RMC finds itself at the number 4 spot on the list, Lightning Rod at Dollywood. I dropped it a couple spots from last year, but it still remains one of my all-time favorites. The first half is good. You've got a zippy uphill launch, a decent first drop, plus a wave turn and an outer banked hill that gives some nice sideways floater airtime. But once you hit that second off-axis hill, Lightning Rod turns it up to 11. The airtime starts to get progressively stronger, until you find yourself barreling down the ride's famous quad down on the mountainside. And this quad down is every bit as good as advertised, with 4 wild ejector airtime pops that only get more insane as you go. By the bottom of this quad down, you've reached the ride's 73 mph top speed for a second time, which is just insane to think about, before powering through a high bank turn and into the final brakes. It's not a super long ride, but it's the definition of high octane, especially with that awesome hot rod theme. Just be sure to get a ride later in the day. To be honest, a slow morning ride on Lightning Rod probably wouldn't even crack my top 10. But by the time the trains have sped up and the sun has gone down, it's more than worthy of holding a spot as high as number 4 on this list. Up next, defending its number 3 ranking from last year, we have the reigning queen of the Giga Coasters, Fury 325. This is still my favorite B&M by a mile, and honestly this hardly feels like it was even built by B&M because of how intense it is compared to other coasters of the same model. Even so, Fury is probably the least intense of my elite tier of roller coasters, but it doesn't need to try and kill you like Skyrush or Twisted Timbers to be so great. Instead, Fury's strengths lie in its duration, smoothness, and above all, re-rideability. There's genuinely no coaster I'd rather marathon for a whole day than this one, and I certainly wouldn't get bored because even if the forces aren't crushingly powerful, it still brings enough to the table to make this ride a world-class coaster. The first drop, which is my favorite drop on a Giga, is just incredible, and the freefall sensation might be the best on any coaster out there. The turns in the first half mesh quick bursts of airtime with laterals, and they really shine in the front row, while those in the back are perfectly positioned for the ride's signature treble clef turnaround, which produces another amazing moment of sideways full ejector. Fury caps it off with 3 camelback hills, which treat everyone in the train to some spectacular and sustained flowjector airtime. Everything about this ride was designed to perfection, from its super long and fulfilling ride experience to its comfortable clamshell lap bars to its interactions with the park entrance, and I still can't get enough after nearly 100 rides. Fury 325 absolutely lives up to the hype, and I'm so grateful that I essentially get to have it in my backyard. Coming in at number 2, we have Jurassic World Velocicoaster. My number 1 coaster from 2021 can't quite defend its title from last year, but that's not a knock against this intimate multi-launch coaster by any means. This is the definition of a full package roller coaster. The layout, the forces, the trains, the theming, everything has been crafted to near flawlessness. The queue literally feels like an attraction in itself, and accomplishes the seemingly impossible task of making waiting in line fun. The ride experience is top-notch, with 2 punchy launches and powerful airtime moments highlighted by some off-axis hills and the ride's stunning 155-foot top hat. And if you're an inversion lover, you're in luck. Velocicoaster's got 4 of them, and every single one is top tier. The Immelman dive loop combo violently ejects you from your seat, and the 0G stall piles on the hang time. But nothing can even begin to hold a candle to the Mosasaurus roll at the end of the ride. This perfectly profiled barrel roll over the park's lagoon is nothing short of euphoric, and it's not only the best inversion I've ever experienced, but it's the single best coaster element I've ever experienced, period. I also never thought a coaster like this would be as fun to watch as it is to ride, but Velocicoaster's photo ops and interactions with guest pathways make this a reality. Combine all of these aspects and you've got a true masterpiece that's easily my favorite intimate. I'll be rewriting Velocicoaster this summer and we'll see if it can reclaim the top spot, but for now it's a very strong number 2 for me. And topping the list at number 1 is Soarin' Eagle at Luna Park. Just kidding, that ride is a pile of trash. Number 1 is Steel Vengeance at Cedar Point. I had a really hard time deciding between this and Velocicoaster since my top 2 are so far beyond anything else that I've ever ridden, but I had to give the edge to Vengeance for a few reasons. The most important one has to be the fact that it's got the most airtime of any coaster in the world, with a whopping 27.2 seconds spent soaring out of your seat. And because the ride is so freaking long, you never stop launching out of your seat. Giant sustained hills, quick and powerful pops, sideways bangs, name any kind of airtime, and odds are Steel Vengeance has it. You'll also find 4 inversions for variety, 3 solid 0G rolls and a whippy half 0G stall, which are all a lot of fun. But the star of the show is undeniably the airtime, which starts before the train even hits the lift hill. Star moments include a wildly underrated first drop, 2 enormous airtime hills, one of which is outer banked, and a ton of quick ejector pops that have become a hallmark of any RMC. The sheer amount of elements Steel Vengeance has to offer is simply remarkable, and the fact that most of it is tangled within the ride's massive wooden structure creates an endless amount of terrifying, but equally as awesome head choppers. On top of all that, every inch of the ride's 5,740 feet of track is glass smooth, which is vital considering Steel Vengeance already takes a lot out of you. But even though the ride is a workout, it's well worth it every single time, even if those queue line lockers are as annoying as they are. Some people have started hating on it lately, but at the end of the day, there's no denying that Steel Vengeance is one of the world's best roller coasters. Maybe the world's best roller coaster. And if you haven't ridden it yet, get out to Cedar Point and do just that, because it's seriously incredible, and it's more than worthy of holding the title of my number 1 roller coaster. That finishes out my top 20 roller coasters as of 2022. I know there were a lot of great coasters that didn't quite make the cut, like Stormrider at Hershey Park, Haggard's at Islands of Adventure, and Magnum XL200 at Cedar Point, which by the way, is underneath Gemini, sorry not sorry. So if you feel like I got anything wrong, or you feel like everything I said was right, be sure to leave a comment below. Also, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss next year's rankings as well as a variety of other content. And be sure to check out CLT Coasters on Instagram. The link's down in the description. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope you have a fantastic day. Take care everybody, and Happy New Year.